on that. And then we've got a little bit about future events that Emma will take us through at the end of the session. The background to this is I'm basically doing this research over the last 2 years, and this has involved quite a lot of understanding and so forth. And really, what I was trying to look at was sort of the people side of lean, because most of lean is dominated very much by the sort of technical tools and methods and so forth, but perhaps the understanding of the people side has not been as strong for many organizations. And in fact, some of you in the audience there were some of the sites that that I visited. So certainly Roche at the Ballytifnan site in Sligo was one of the companies that was part of this research, etc. So what I'm going to do is say, well, if we really want to get a greater contribution on the lean side, that what we need to think about is we help people in the HR community to apply lean into their side of the organization so that they can get a better understanding of what lean is about. And then we can try and unlock a lot of the potential with the HR community to help drive, if you like, lean further forward. So that was sort of the logic behind this work. And as you can see, I've probably spent about 200 days on this, mostly sitting in this office here, references, PowerPoint slides. As you can see, here's a list of some of the sites that that I visited. So in fact, we've got the Abbott Diagnostics Sligo with us, the Ballytifnan site with us. I haven't seen Costas yet, but there's some Hilti material, and you can see some of the other organizations present here that I actually got case material from. So if we start with HR, I was trying to understand what is the state of lean in HR, and how is this being adopted in different sites and different organizations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this sort of lean in HR, then we'll stop and have some workshop activity. So Emma's going to split you into 3 working groups, and you can have a conversation on that. And so I'll sort of summarize. I'll go fairly quickly through this to show you sort of what I found. But really the starting point is if we're thinking about lean or enterprise excellence or Lean Six Sigma or whatever names we use for this sort of continuous improvement, that it's a bit like a dislocated bridge. That on one side of the bridge over here is probably the traditional, whether it's lean or Six Sigma or operational excellence or agile, probably they're 80% similar to each other. And this is probably driven by departments such as operations, maybe ICT for the agile, engineering, quality, etc. So what you find is because of the nature of those sort of departments, they tend to be often quite technical orientated, tool, fact-based, etc. And probably one of the other things we should say is male dominated. So again, if we look at our audience on the call, probably more of the men are from that side, and perhaps more of the ladies are from the other side of the bridge, which probably in Toyota terms, we could say the left-hand side is what they would call continuous improvement, the tools and methods well known to us. Whereas the right-hand side is what Toyota would call respect for people. In other words, getting the best out of people. So here, we tend to have HR, perhaps some of you might have an organizational development department. Maybe that's a term that's gone for many. And here we tend to be focusing more on cultural change and leadership and so forth. And what I found during the research is that really the two sides have not met each other particularly well. So really it's trying to sort of understand the left-hand side more and the how do we join this together. And some of the influence on this have been my sort of almost lifelong study of the Toyota organization. I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about Toyota, but there are one or two references to this in the literature, and there's a book by Jeff Leiker and Mike Sayers, quote from Gritton, who was a former VP of HR for Toyota in North America. And you can see here, so if there's a magic to Toyota production system, then this is it. Successful implementation of human resource philosophies that create the buy-in and engagement of the people necessary to run such a simple but intricate system. And the second quote, it requires a level of patience, a long-term view, a focus on process, and the ability to understand where the individual is in his or her development. So from that, it's sort of reinforcing the view that there's a lot on the people side that perhaps we're not sufficiently utilizing in the sort of lean or enterprise excellence area. And the second thing that Pete is talking about here is that there's a lot about how we actually develop our people through this lifelong journey organization. So this is in terms of where we're going in this session. And one of the other influences I've had is a lady called Cheryl Jekyll, and she'll pop up again towards the end, and we'll talk a little bit about her at the end of the presentation. But some of the things, this actually comes out of her first book. She's got two books, and they both have the same title. I'm trying to find, I can't reach it. They're both called Lean Human Resources, but they're actually first and second edition, but they're actually quite different. This version here was out in 2011, and the second edition came out just this year, which really shows some of her thinking as it's developed. So looking at this quote here, you can see, so she says, organizations are wasting significant amount of their people's talent to transform work cultures, but their efforts, which would work to people, often fail. Significant business problems are amplified by weaknesses in how the HR department is utilized. In addition, the failure to more fully involve HR and all related are key reasons for this efforts. So I think we're probably, most of us in this audience, I wouldn't say we've got unsuccessful lean efforts, but could they be more successful is probably a point here. So I think this is a good perspective for us to start with. So if we look at some of the examples, including one or two of you listening here. So first of all, what I found is, if you looked at the literature on lean, the academic literature or websites and so forth, and have a look at lean HR, there's actually very few examples of this. So the book that I mentioned here, books really on lean HR. So one is this, one is, I'll show you the second one. I'll just trying to keep talking while I'm just finding it for you. So this is the second book on lean HR. If you're interested to not buy a book, I would recommend this one. Don't buy it, it's a waste of money. Anyway, that's on lean HR. It's not very useful. This is actually Cheryl's second book. And there's actually one book which is on agile HR, which actually doesn't come out till next year, apparently. I just bought it, so it's very, very new. And I think this lady, Tommy, is Finnish. Rena Hellstrom. Sounds like I think she's from Finland. The book I haven't just read yet because I've just got that. But so anyway, some of the key findings of lean HR. So what most of the cases, if you look on reading about this, is really what people have done is they've looked at the processes within HR, like recruitment or promotion or things like that, and they've mapped them out, and they've tried to find how can we improve the process or the part of HR. So in other words, it's very much a sort of modification of value stream mapping that perhaps those of us who've done a lot of lean might have done in manufacturing environments. So this example, and I'm only really going to flash these up, is from a bakery company in the US that Cheryl had worked with, called McKee's. And very much they've taken different aspects of HR. They've done a value stream map, they turned it into an A3 improvement project, and done that sort of thing. So they looked at things like recruitment, for example, and you can see a sort of team working on it here. This was another example. I didn't visit this site. This is the Mexican government, the Human Resource Office of the Mexican government. So in other words, so it's a labor department, I suppose, something like that. And they were having a problem in recruitment. So they used what looks like a sort of process activity mapping activity. They mapped out how they recruited people, and they then sort of put in effectively a sort of cellular manufacturing process where the team came together sort of for a huddle and into a sort of virtual production line environment, and were focused on the customer needs, and very much had a flow and vastly reduced the recruitment process. So that would be a sort of textbook example, actually, from about 10 years ago. Another example here, this is actually from part of the Hilti organization that is one of our members. So this is the the North European head office, which is UK, Ireland, and Scandinavia. And this is probably one of the two most advanced that I've seen in terms of the application of lean into HR. So this is just one example. They actually mapped out several different of the HR traditional processes. In this case, it's the merit review process. And as you can see, the sort of swim lane, if you're familiar with the swim lane, where you have the different people, the different steps, and the interaction. So they actually did this for several of their different HR processes. And we'll have a look a little bit at them later as well. I think some of you might be with us for our last session, where we had a session with STMicroelectronics in Singapore and India. And I'm using a few slides from them, but these were not ones I think we spent time on last time, because what they do is a lot more than just the behavioural side that we were looking at. And again, this is probably furthest ahead with the Hilti in Manchester that I found. So this is actually a PCB factory in Singapore, huge, I know, 4,000 or 5,000 people, absolutely huge site. And what you can see here is they actually have not just mapped a process, they've actually developed the process into an Obeya room. And they've turned this into a year-long activity to improve the process. So what they do is, if you like, value stream map the process, identify the needs of what they're trying to achieve. In this case, it was the employee survey. So what they were trying to do here was to increase the employee engagement score, and they had targets of what they were trying to do. So this is, if you like, their plan for the year. This is quarter one, quarter two, 3, 4, and then going into the next year. So this would be the different activity that they're doing to try and improve that. And then this would be how it's being applied into different departments in the organization. So what you can see is it's actually a continual improvement approach applied for one process in HR on a continuous basis. So that was one example of that process. I thought I'd show you, I think I've got 3 of them here. So this example, and as you can see, this is sort of pictures from an Obeya room where they come and meet on a weekly basis to improve this. This was the people review process. So here they were trying to improve the people review, so as you can see on the left-hand side, this is the plan for the year, the roadmap, what they're trying to do. This is what they're doing, these are the activities, and then applied to the different area. So very much the same sort of thinking in terms of addressing strategy for the site, strategy for HR. The process is very much following a timeline, creating clarity. They use the 1-3-10 rule that perhaps many of you, I know sites in Ireland have used. So in 1 second, you can see if there's what the status is or if there's a problem. In 3 seconds, you can see details, and in 10 seconds, you can see what they're doing about it. So as you can see, quite sophisticated sort of activity. This one was for the IMP process. As you can see, very much the same sort of thing. So what you can see is in this example is there's really quite a step up in the detail of which they're actually doing it. This is not necessarily appropriate for a smaller site, but obviously a huge site like the one here. I'm not sure how many HR people there have on site. My guess is sort of 20, 25, something like that. It's a significant team. So you can have quite a lot of specialism in that environment. So some of you would have heard Camille Pied talking last time, and she's more an OD person that was talking more about the behavioural deployment. So these are some of the other areas. This is an example from a site that doesn't exist anymore. So those of you again over in Ireland will remember the Roche site in Castle Clare, which shut a little while back. And here you can see they were looking at the hire to retire. So in other words, they were looking at this sort of people flow, and they were looking here at the key metrics so that they could actually improve that flow. So what you can see from these examples is quite a few examples of looking at HR processes in a sort of lean way. I found a couple examples of looking at Mura. I thought I'd show you this one that was actually from the Hilti site in Manchester, because I thought this was a particularly nice application of looking at probably the first examples were more looking at reducing the lead time and waste and so forth in HR processes. This was actually looking at reducing variation. So what they did here is they divided the organization into these different sub-functions, which are probably sort of familiar terms to those of you from an HR sort of background: reward, talent management, recruitment, etc. And what they did is they developed this map, and the map was basically a pre-planner of when are the busy times of the year. So when are we likely to be busy, so that they could actually do some moving staff between the functions of HR, so they could level out activity. And this goes down, I didn't put the slide in, to a weekly basis where they actually look at daily activity, so they can even do it within a week and not just on a month-by-month basis. But I thought it was a nice example of taking this idea of Mura in terms of leveling the flow a little bit. And there were a number of examples, and some of you, this is where I think I've got from some of you present, of the application of visual management boards and sort of huddles and so forth in HR. Again, this example was from Roche, the site that's closed now. And the reason I show this is not that this is actually an HR department, but this is actually the application of some HR thinking into the whole site. This is actually the level. And you can see this picture on the left-hand side is the visual management board in the managing director's room, tier 5. There's actually, rather confusing, there's 4 tiers, 4 levels in the organization. But what I want to point out is that here there's a focus on learning. So they started all of their huddles at all levels with actually what have we learnt since the last meeting. So if this is a daily meeting or a weekly meeting. So what you can see here is that actually we're getting some influence of the sort of people side and creating this sort of learning organization by bringing some people thinking into the sort of normal lean activity. And this is I think this is the Longford site rather than the Sligo in Abbott. You can see this is the HR board there. What you can see in Abbott is they have a board that looks like this. You know, who are we? What are we trying to achieve? KPIs, measures against that. What are the short-term improvements? What are the longer-term improvements? What are the trend, etc. And what you can see is in this Abbott site in Longford in Ireland, is they have a very good system of applying lean across the business, and in HR they applied it exactly as you would apply it in finance or purchasing or any of the other sort of office type environments. And on the left hand side you can see some Shingo model here. You can see sort of what's it called, first aid, physical and mental aid. And you can see down the bottom an example of an A3 problem solving. So what you can see is a good example of applying a normal lean approach into an HR department. And this is an example of the visual board at the so this would be they have a weekly meeting at the STMicro Singapore site, at this site where all the HR community come together for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So it's a long meeting, once a week, and they look at all of these different pieces of information and so forth. So they won't be looking at skills here in orange. This is the behaviors down here. This is about improving productivity. These are some of the projects. So again, without going into the huge detail, they've developed quite a unique approach that's actually quite different from other departments. It's not a copy of another department, so they very much customized it. If anything, they probably have far too much information on the board. And I remember one of the things I was fascinated is they had a huge information about the learning and development of people, but they had nothing about their own learning and development. So in other words, it was very much about applying HR to the site rather than improving our own people. And Ross, I think you might recognize this board. Hopefully it's maybe the same now or similar. But again, it's very similar to the sort of thing that we saw at the Abbott Longford site in terms of people, recognition, strategy, KPIs, projects, strategy, trends, and so forth. So in other words, what you see on this picture and at the Abbott site is a very good application of lean into an HR environment. And what I saw, I've only put one example up. This is that there's quite a bit of examples of the application of problem solving. In this particular case, as you can see, it's 3C, or we could say A3, problem solving, concern, cause, countermeasures, as well as sort of simpler problem solving. But again, similar that you might see in other departments, etc. And a few examples on behaviors. And again, if you were with us for the ST, you'd have seen this. This was a blown up picture of some of the application of behaviors into the HR team at the Singapore site that we talked about. So this is what Camille Pierre talked about last time. So this is the HR team in this particular part of the organization. And they developed 3 behavioral areas they were trying to work on. Is that they do Gemba walks. So this is HR people doing Gemba walks on the site. They develop mid and long term work. So in other words, they're not just focusing on the short term. and that they concluded each meeting with top 3 priorities. So they decided that these were behaviours that were important, and then this is what are we doing about it, and whether we improve. And what you can see here is little cards explaining what the Gemba is about. So for each of these behaviours, there's information here. So this particular example is all bridging the gap between lean in HR, but actually HR for lean. So what they've done is the HR department has rolled this approach out, having piloted it itself, and they've now applied this to 80 teams across the STMicro site. So in other words, 80 local teams. So this is all bar the very lowest level teams. So level 2, 3, 4, etc. have applied this sort of behavior monitoring, behavioral improvement at their sites. And for each of the behaviors, there's a sort of little card thing, which on the back tells you what it's about, how to do it, what's good, what's bad, etc., etc. So again, some nice examples of this. This example has probably taken the concept of the huddle, the team meeting, the furthest of any that I've seen on a worldwide basis. Again, this is from ST. This site is a R&D facility, non-manufacturing, in just outside New Delhi, where they're designing sort of Internet of Things, AI, all the sort of very Industry 4.0 type technology. They're making then the chips and so forth that they then sell to Apple and various companies like that. And what we see here is they've completely taken the concept of think about culture and behavior first before you look at systems, before you look at tools and techniques. So they've completely changed their meeting so that, and this is piloted in HR, but again, this has now been taken across to other departments such as the R&D and they have an IT back off there as well. So, excuse me, they have a weekly meeting in HR. So this is all in a room, not actually quite in this layout, but it's a sort of small Obeya type room. And on this board here, they've developed the 4 behaviors that they think would be most important for moving HR forward. So these were, and each team has their own acronym. So their behaviors are slightly different. And then their acronym is HIVE, because they think a hive is a very strong community. So HIVE is offering or seeking help. So people asking for help. I is sharing directly. So this is having difficult conversations. So if I have a problem with you, Mira, I'll actually come and talk to you about it. We won't hide it and disguise it that it doesn't happen. Visual management board is actually using their own personal visual management board. So each team member has their own visual management board at their desk that they use on a daily basis. And excellence is sharing one thing that's excellence across the team. So I think I've done this really well. I'd like to share it, which is a self-recognition, but it's also things for people to learn. So 60% of the meeting is about this and the stories that they tell. 40% is then looking at some of the normal sort of HR processes that we might see. In this case, this example is talent management. And I really love how they've displayed this. I actually have another example there on OD as well. But they actually mapped out in a little book, a little book like this across the site of all the processes, and they mapped them out with sort of flow charts. And it technically was brilliant, but engaging. So what they did is they started looking at processes and doing them in this sort of fun, cartoony type way. And actually, they discovered one of the HR team who had this skill of drawing like this. So, and it became alive to people once they could see that. So basically, they organized what their processes were. And on this sort of visual management board, this is the improvement. So each of these columns down here, each of these columns down here, these rows here, is one of the processes. And then this talks about what are we doing? what improvements are we doing, what projects are we doing, and projects might be bigger projects using A3, or they might be small projects. And at the bottom here, you can see some sort of small bottom-up improvement tickets. So when we need a little Kaizen project, they fill in the ticket and then they do some improvement. And then when this is around the record. And then the last 10% of the meeting is actually around the KPIs, which is more like the lag metrics. And as you can see, it's almost like we'll have a quick look. Unless there's any big problem, we won't really need to talk about that. And what they're saying, as long as we get the behaviors right and the process of being improvement, the results will speak for themselves. So this is the first organization that I've seen that have actually changed the order from tools to systems to culture and actually focus the reverse way round. So I've gone through that reasonably fast. The reason being that the second half of what I have is actually longer than the first half. So that's why I've sort of gone through that, you know, reasonably fast. So I'm gonna sort of stop and draw breath for a minute, and maybe if there's any questions, we can do that now. And then we'll sort of maybe split you into groups and you can have a think about a few of the implications for you of what you've seen. So first of all, any questions anyone would like to raise?
Peter, I have one question maybe to your research, Christian here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion right now going on, at least in Denmark, in terms of humanocracy and how we can develop organizations fit for humans.
Okay, yes.
Instead of organizations that have become more or less machines over the past many years.
Yes.
And in this track around leadership and HR, some of the leadership and HR systems we put in place over the past 10, 20 years, some of the value behind that is starting to be questioned. So you can take the whole scoring system, performance management system, where we have been learning the best practices to score each other on a scale from 1 to 6 every year, and then provide a bonus based on that. A lot of companies are actually taking those systems down and doing something else. So in your research, have you come about some perspective on this? How we can maybe not optimize systems that are not value adding, but maybe just take them away?
I think you make a very good point. That probably comes more into the second part of what I'm going to talk about, but you're absolutely right. And what we could say is the sort of classic lean has not been very clever at looking at the human side and the well-being of people and this sort of thing. And it's very much been looking at, you know, make more stuff, make more money, rather than actually create an environment people want to work in and so forth. And so I've looked quite a lot at some of the wellness and thing like Ikigai, which is something coming out of Japan, which is about the sort of wellness of the person, not just at work, but, you know, in the whole environment, and how we create a flow, how we focus on the needs of the individual, not just the needs of the business. And that probably comes into more of what I'll talk about in the second half about this people values idea. But something we're going to talk about right at the end is we started another network just on a virtual basis where we're having a little launch event 2 days time, which is around this people value stream, which and in that our first discussion, which is more like a debate, you know, sharing, is actually on this exact topic, Christian, performance management. And we're going to have a debate from, you know, the one extreme is that you actually have to score people and so many percentage go in each box. So you're forced to put 20% in the poor performing, you know, the Jack Welch sort of mentality, and worst 10% we have to sack, even if they're very good. to right the other end. And probably the furthest we've seen is maybe some of the new economy companies, you know, the Googles and Facebooks and Netflix. Netflix is a big example actually of this, where they've just completely rejected all the sort of traditional HR stuff and just said it doesn't work at all. And we've got to focus on the development of people. We've got to stop doing things that harm people, and we've got to really build up what they're doing. And actually, probably picking up on this is some of the more agile sort of technology and companies using that sort of thinking. So there's quite a lot of West Coast US companies, and obviously Scandinavia's been traditionally quite strong on you know, from the Volvo Uddevalla times onwards and so forth in this area. So yes, is the answer, I suppose. Yeah, rather long answer, sorry.
Don't worry.
Okay, other questions? Maybe you could turn your cameras back on. You've all disappeared. It's like looking at a screen, blank screen.
One question from my side. This is Tommy. Regarding those visual management boards, I do like those. But now, especially during COVID time, people are working from the home offices, and
Yes.
we have more and more global teams instead of local on-site teams, or not only in HR but also in other functions. So any good examples what companies have been doing and transferring the visual management board into digital world?
Well, I mean, a number of the examples that I've shown have done exactly what you're talking about. I haven't shown those, but a number of them have basically taken the board and just digitized it. So for instance, you know, digitize the behavior bit, digitize the whole board, and they just share it like on a Teams or a Zoom platform like we're doing. Someone puts like a PowerPoint slide up of the visual board, and then they sort of go through. So really they've greatly simplified how they've actually done that, and digitized it and so forth. So actually on that whole point, one of the events that we're going to look going forward is that Kostas, who's not with us today, from Hilti, he's done some really nice work on the how do you actually increase the amount of lean central office activity and improve the amount of lean work in COVID, rather than say we can't do it. So he's actually going to share some results of what he's been doing to say how can we use some of this sort of technology to actually do more activity and cut out the wasted time traveling and so forth, but be quite effective, which I think will be useful for us to share that experience and so forth. Okay, thanks, Tommy. Any other questions?
It's Kay here. I suppose I see this as a great opportunity for lean and HR, and for HR as more embedded in the business in a real way. You know, there we can be involved in ensuring that the people strategy is very much connected to the business and the manufacturing strategy as well, which sometimes can be very segregated, because lean typically is probably more developed in manufacturing systems and processes on manufacturing sites. So I think HR have to go on this, but I think it's a great opportunity if we could embrace it. So I don't know, you know, have you had any feedback or trends or information around that appetite from HR?
The answer is we seem to have uncovered a huge appetite in this particular area. So I first started talking about this 2 years ago. The first talk I did on this was at Waterford Institute of Technology at their annual conference just over 2 years ago. And it was probably the most well-received talk that I've actually given there in terms of the enthusiasm. And there were very few HR people in the audience. It was the lean community who was sort of going, without quite admitting it, yes, there's something in this. It's this sort of type of thing. But when I've spoken to HR people, what I've often found is they know they have a lot more to offer then the organizations are sort of pulling on them, and sometimes feeling a little bit like the Cinderella in the organization, that, you know, they want to do strategic stuff to help the organization, but everyone else thinks they should just do payroll and, you know, sort of very, you know, transactional stuff, and not really get so involved in the sort of improvement activity. I guess that's sort of what you're saying as well.
Yes.
That sort of opportunity that it's there. Yeah. Which is where I want to try and go in the second half, in terms of how might we do that, and so forth, for some ideas on that. Any more? Okay, should we put you into little? Maybe we'll put you into 3 groups. I think we suggested. And maybe give you a 10-minute sort of conversation time, so that you could just, you know, bounce around a few implications of the things that we were talking about, just in your small groups.
Yeah. So
does that sound good? So I think
I have put you into 3 random groups. So I will click the button, then you'll go into your groups. So I'll kind of go in and out, and then after 10 minutes, we'll come back to the main room. Is that okay, Peter?
Yeah. So just have a chat in the group. So hopefully you should know roughly who each other are, and if you don't know the person, they're probably from Sligo. Is the answer.
Okay, here we go.
Emma, unfortunately, I have to drop off now, so I'll leave it to you. I'll get a download from René and Annette afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll send.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christian.
Thanks, Christian.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, it's just us. This is it.
Very strange when that happens.
I think I might just leave them alone for 10 minutes and let them just have a bit of a chat.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
It was actually different from the OC Tanner. I mean, I shortened it quite a lot. I think it was probably better shorter.
I think so. Yeah. And your slides show lots of stuff visually anyway. So yeah, that was really good.
I mean, you could do like 20 minutes on each slide, really, if you went into the details. But I think for today that was okay not to.
Yeah, I think so. Good.
So yeah, I keep buying books. The trouble is, I buy a book, then I read a book, and it takes me about between 1 and 2 weeks to read a book, because I then make notes on it, which goes into the 1,500 slides. But then I never do anything else, because it's read.
Oh.
So I got this Agile HR book, so I want to read that, which is the sort of stuff that I think Christian was sort of talking about more.
It was good to have Christian here.
Yeah, I suppose we haven't got Costas. I don't know if
no, he didn't.
Did he say he couldn't make it, or?
And I kind of sent a few emails. He does do this. I found that sometimes he just pops up and he doesn't say anything. Other times he just doesn't turn up. But he's I think he's fine. I've messaged him about catching up about the host site as well, about hosting, and I haven't heard from him. So I think his efficient way of working is, if it's not on the top of his priority, he just doesn't respond.
Well, I think he's probably recovering from that week he spent with me.
Yes.
That probably blew his diary a bit, and he's probably catching up on stuff. So
so yeah, he's not here.
So actually, I think we have 4 sites from Sligo present. It's quite bizarre, isn't it?
It really is.
Perhaps we should move our office to Sligo.
Yeah. Is there much to do in Sligo? I'm not sure.
No.
When there was not. I mean, the airport was just like the freakiest place I've ever been.
Yeah, well, that was definitely the middle of nowhere, wasn't it?
Yeah. And
I mean, Sligo's not too bad as a town.
no.
But
no, I'm fine in Sevenoaks. Seems to be a bit more going on.
yeah, Sevenoaks, or One Oak, is it now?
Yes, that's true. And weirdly, Sevenoaks was named Sevenoaks before the oak trees. So it wasn't named because of the oak.
Right. Right.
So they must have planted the oak trees. I don't know where Sevenoaks came from, but people often think it's because of there were 7 oak trees, but it goes back further. I might just dip in and out of these groups just to check they're all
okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
So we are kind of learning right now. We are on a journey, you can say, in HR. So we have inherited or stole a lot of the.
But basically looking at how you spread out that workload over the year, because you might have more capacity in quarter 2 and 3 to make.
Structured one-to-ones, having, I suppose, development one-to-ones being separate to structured one-to-ones, because the one-to-ones all managers like having are about tactical, the business. Whereas what we implemented with the help, and Peter did some work with us previously, having what we call developmental.
Are they okay?
Yeah, they're all fine.
Oh, you've been to all of them, have you?
Yeah, just
Okay.
checking. They're all chatting, so they're fine.
Good, good. I mean, I think they just need a bit of time to not just listen.
Yes.
Kay seemed quite switched on, didn't she?
Yeah.
It's a good point she made.
It's good to have quite a few HR people on this.
It is good to have some of those ladies. It is noticeable that all the men, you know, the lean people. I actually was doing this picture. So I was trying to get Sandy to do this, but this is for a leaner, as in TLN. So she wants her people to do it. So it works on the VR. But what you can see is I've lean in the middle. This is the people. And then this is the sort of industry 4.0. And I was sort of, for that course, is going to say, well, lean's in the middle, but we actually need to balance both sides to make it sort of work, etc. So this is all men, and this tends to be nearly women, and this is mostly men. It does tend to be very sexist divide, doesn't it? It's
yeah, I mean, for this workshop, we've had the most amount of women I've seen.
Yeah.
The other ones, it's just, I mean, all of our members are men.
Yeah. I mean, actually, Costa's team is reasonable amount of women.
Yes.
I mean, you know, they go out of their way to try and get, you know, racial, gender, nationality. I don't know about sexual orientation. We'll have to do that as well, but but they certainly have a big range of people.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult for companies because I think manufacturing is not something that, as a female, you don't necessarily feel like you want to go into it, just because of that's how we are manufactured almost. So it's not like the companies are doing it. It's just, you know, anything wrong. It's just that there's not enough women out there who want the jobs.
It's not a girl thing, but
no, and girls are more, I think you can see why they're in HR, you know, they're kind of, I don't know, it's got that maternal kind of element to it.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, Rihanna's doing computer science, and one of her best friends is doing she's now gone on to do a PhD in engineering, which is very unusual for a girl. So
good.
But yeah, so there's a few, but yeah.
It probably will change. I think it will change, especially now with how the world is and how people want it to become more sort of fluid and etc. I think probably in a couple of years there'll be more women in manufacturing.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, I mean, you go into companies and you talk to the board, it's like the token woman is the HR director.
Yeah.
It so often happens.
There's not many men HR directors.
There's few. I mean, Ross and Emmett are HR directors.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a different type of environment.
Yes. I think they're going to start coming back in soon.
Okay.
I think I put like a timer on.
Okay.
Check it's going to actually do it.
So if we bring them back and just give them the 5 minutes to grab a cup of tea or something, and
yeah,
then
perfect.
we'll crack on. Yeah, and probably bring it back, and we can just sort of crack on.
Okay. We have plasterers downstairs plastering our old chimney breast, and they're getting louder and louder. So in those 5 minutes, I'm going to have to tell them to be quiet. Because where I am in the room upstairs, it's next to the chimney breast. So they're downstairs, but the noise is coming through the chimney.
Oh, you can't hear anything?
No, not yet, but I can hear them. Okay, they're coming back in now. Kind of gives a 30-second countdown for them to come back.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hopefully they've had a good chat.
Yeah.
Samantha disappeared.
I know.
I don't think she came back.
No, she messaged me and she just said she was having problems with her technology, so she's gone.
Well, she can always look at the recording, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, I think someone must have given Dave a pay rise. He's looking very happy there.
We were talking away, and we got dragged out of our breakout.
Sorry, the countdown.
You mean you'd had 10 minutes of enjoying yourself and you got yanked out of it?
Okay, that's everyone back.
So we were thinking we might give you 5 minutes to go and grab a cup of tea or something, and then maybe bring it back and we'll just have 5 minutes and crack on, if that's okay.
Yep, sounds
Yep.
great.
Thanks,
In a
Peter.
few minutes.
Yep.
Okay. cold out there. Is it cold up in Sunderland, Mark?
Sunny Scarborough, Peter.
Scarborough, not Sunderland. Yeah, sorry.
Sunny Scarborough. No, it's freezing fog.
Ah,
Yeah, very cold.
it's just cold down here. Hmm. Dave, Cumbraun was in the news today.
Was it?
Mm. There was a bloke, the first jab in Wales was in Cumbraun. The new hospital. Cumbraun's famous now.
What was his name? Do you know?
He was a 48-year-old maintenance worker at a care home.
All right.
So I don't know if it was the hospital or whether it was a gym or I think it was a gym or something, or a stadium or something. But
Right. Yeah, I can't get to Cumbraun at the moment, so I'm still at home in sunny Caerphilly.
ah,
See
very
the
nice.
second person to get the jab in England, 81-year-old gentleman called William Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Really?
Yeah.
He's about 500 years old, is he?
And he's actually, they say he was actually from Warwickshire as well, so it must be.
Really?
I wonder if there's some relation there. Yeah.
That's why I asked Peter, did he know the name of the Cumbraun chap? Because I'd heard the William Shakespeare one. I just didn't know if you were.
No, I hadn't heard that. So Emma, we're all celebrating over here because we had our first vaccinations today in the UK on COVID.
Yeah, no, I saw that. It's great. Yeah, hopefully all the rest of us will be getting it soon enough as well.
Yeah. I don't know what they seem to go through the regulating very quickly in the UK. I don't know if hopefully it was all okay, but
Yes, well, let's hope so. I suppose I hate to say it, but you guys will probably give the rest of us some comfort that it is okay, having tried it out for everyone else.
yeah, test it out on that island near Europe.
What was that? Sorry, you broke up a bit.
I said we'll try it out on that island somewhere near Europe.
Exactly. Yeah, the largest clinical trial in history. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Good. We're coming back. Oh, Tommy, does everyone dress in red in your family?
Excuse me?
Does everyone
Yeah,
have to dress in red in your family?
Yeah, the whole family is wearing red, so Christmas is quite close. So yeah.
Oh, you have like a reindeer on your shirt.
Yeah.
So I guess you're a lot nearer Lapland than the rest of us.
Yeah, not very close actually. They are almost 1,000 kilometers to Lapland, but yeah, quite close.
Yeah, very good. So do you have snow?
Compared to the rest of you, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So is it snowy in Finland now?
It's there and there. Yeah, not really. So you're not able to ski at least in southern part of Finland, but clearly in more northern, people are skiing already.
Uh-huh.
It's been relatively warm
Good.
warm autumn for us. So
yeah.
Snow
I think climate change. Yeah. You'll soon have a wine industry in Finland.
Wine industry. What? Not
Climate
even
change.
close. Yeah, we're not there yet. Not even close.
Anyway, I think I'm going to make a start again because I think people are back or near enough. So I'm going to go back to the slide. So I think we won't do a feedback because there's still quite a lot to go through. We'll go through that, and then perhaps we'll have some more work breakouts and then a feedback after that, if that's okay. Yeah. So let me find my screen again. Okay. So the first thinking about HR, and you can see different organizations, certainly some application, but I mean, very much what I've been showing you has been the exception rather than the rule. So the number of companies applying lean that I go into, usually the HR department is just, there's nothing there, you know, in terms of an application of lean. So this is sort of not usual cases. So think about HR a little bit. I'm sure those of you from an HR background will be familiar with the sort of Ulrich stool and some of the sort of approach that HR has been organized, and about 50% HR organizations are organized in this way these days. So some areas of HR, the shared service, the sort of payroll, back office, transactional stuff are often hived off and maybe put into some global or regional center, certainly for larger organizations. And then there might be sort of centers of excellence developed, which could be at site level or even divisional group, which might be looking at certain specific process in HR, like reward or learning and development, something like that. And then probably the site level people mostly are more sort of strategic partners, which are probably doing more of the sort of normal sort of day-to-day sort of working with organizations, trying to encourage them to think in the right way and so forth. So this sort of Ulrich stool seems to be the way most organizations have gone. However, this isn't, and what I've seen and read and talked to, some of it worked as well as it might in some cases. If we look at the strategic partner side of things, that sometimes this hasn't worked because sometimes HR hasn't been taken as seriously as it sort of functions in the organization, and sometimes gets felt, some people I've talked to have sort of said we're a bit of the Cinderella of the organization, that perhaps we're not being taken as seriously as, and the potential we have is much greater than is being realized. And then the sort of outsourcing or call center sort of stuff has often gone offshore or somewhere like that, for sort of a bit like the ICT went offshore, and some of the HR stuff has gone offshore in some cases. In terms of the sort of change agent side of things, which was the sort of organizational development, from what I can see is, for many organizations, this has been a bit lost. There's almost been a step back from this, as at the same time, a lot of HR seems to have been cut back in terms of resources and spend, etc. So some of this developing and looking after people, and therein lies quite a problem, I think, for lean and enterprise excellence, in as much that the people that were there to the people have been cut back, so that the people looking after, so line management traditionally was done in HR, but maybe they're not so interested in it, or they don't have the time for it, or the perception they don't have the time. So some of that has got a bit lost, I think, in some organizations. And the employee champion, again, is still there, but again, it can be less strong. From some of the things, some of the like orchids, and some of the sort of research that's been done in this area has sort of talks about a rather mixed journey. In some areas it's moved forward, but in some areas there's been actual issues about. And sort of thinking about how HR fit together. And if we're evolving lean from the traditional tools and techniques to looking at a whole system like a value stream or strategy deployment or, I don't know, continuous improvement or something like that. And then the evolution about culture. And it would seem to me if lean is about culture, there's a much bigger role for the HR community in terms of driving that. And hence in evolution, I sort of liken the good old days of tools in lean, probably the 80s or whatever, something like that, 90s or whatever, is probably likened to the other movement where you know, HR was much more this sort of clerical type of thing. Whereas I suppose for most organizations, we moved on to this sort of HRM era where doing a lot of the sort of Ulrich Stuhl type areas. But what I'm sensing, and this sort of links into the question that that Christian asked earlier, is that maybe some of the things there are maybe questionable. You know, performance reviews might be one of them, or some HR policies, etc. And I'm sort of suggesting maybe we should see HR much more in the sort of development role, because if we think about the top part of lean evolving, primarily where lean is being applied more in the organization has been, if you like, the product value stream or the product development value stream. So we're looking at the flow of information from customer through planning back to supplies, and then the physical flow, conversion, manufacturing, service application, whatever. And if we think about this HR evolution, maybe we could think about the HRD being, if we're thinking of that in a sort of lean sense, is maybe we could be looking at the sort of life cycle of the people, a little bit like some of the hints earlier, or thinking maybe about this as the people value stream. And we could almost go as far as saying, if you managed the product value stream and you manage the people value stream, these would be the two value streams that we should apply in lean organization. And actually, if you think about things like the visual management boards and what people should do, the roles and responsibilities at different levels, improvement, culture, change, etc., we could actually think of this as all being part of this people value stream. So this actually could take a lot of what we do in lean, but think about this in a people rather than a technical sense. So I'll explain more about what I mean by that in a minute. So going back to this sort of picture that we showed at the beginning, this sort of HR for lean, I think certainly covers the right-hand side of the picture, but I think we could also see this as the joining up or humanizing the technical side of what's been applied in this sort of enterprise excellence or lean. And some of you may have read the Essence of Excellence book that I wrote with my colleague Chris Butterworth, came out last year, and it actually has some examples of some of the companies, some of you present. And in this book, we talk about what we'd be applying in lean is we should be thinking about the technical and this people side of lean, and we should be applying this into 4 core operating systems in the organization to make lean work. So this is not, you know, the product flow or whatever. This is what you need to do to create lean to really work, to create the engagement, to create a bedrock, to create sustainable change. So the 4 areas were the behavior and strategy deployment, just strategy deployment, but actually deploying what are the principles or values, what behaviors do we want, how do we apply those. So you saw a couple of examples earlier in before tea break. And then continuous improvement is probably the classic sort of improvement, A3 problem solving, value stream mapping that we're familiar with in lean. And then leader standard work is, if you like, the role of the leaders in making this actually happen, servant leadership, and then really creating this learning and development environment where the core thing is actually about the development of our people. So those of you sort of sitting more in the HR sort of side of things can see immediately from this, there's quite a lot of people stuff in there. So the first part is the alignment of the organization. What are we trying to achieve? Why we need to do it? But also the culture we want. The improving organization, the engaging organization is around the role of the leaders and creating that. And the learning organization is basically about how do we get individuals and hence teams and hence the whole organization to learn and improve and develop at a faster pace. So this is sort of what we wrote about in our last book. And one insight that I had, actually last year, I was running if you remember that time when we could all come together and we had physical courses, I was running a course at the Boston Scientific site, some of you would know, in Clonmel. And this picture's not particularly relevant, this just happens to be their operations excellence team board. Is one of the delegates said, well, you know, a reflection they had was the effectiveness of lean or enterprise excellence was closely linked to how good is the visual management board and the behaviors around it. And we sort of debated that for a bit, and we thought, well, actually, there's quite a lot in that. But the problem, the boards, is they tend to be technically very strong, but the people stuff seems to be very weak on the board, which doesn't encourage us to get to the right behaviors, because all the systems we talk about tend to be very mechanistic. So I sort of think about this, and I developed a sort of what should be perhaps on one of these boards. And I was thinking, well, if we divide that into our purpose, in other words, what are we trying to achieve at whatever level, this team, the whole site, this team, etc. Our processes, what are the processes we manage in this particular environment, and our people. And what you can see on this board, I filled in the, if we were managing, slight technical problem. I've got my left and my right hands the wrong way around. So this was the bridge, sorry, I got it the wrong way around. It should have been the other way around. So this is the more technical side. So what are we trying to achieve? What does that mean to us? Why are we doing it? What's critical to our success? KPIs, what are our values, our improvement, attendance, and our standard work in the team? All of that is the sort of thing that you see perhaps on classic improvement boards, which is very much the technical part of lean. But actually it's missing, there's often very, very little on these boards that's around the people side. So the other part here, which is probably missing, is some of the communications. So if we think of maybe, I don't know with your organization, whether internal communication sits in HR, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but that's sort of internal communications. Understanding the voice of the customer, but particularly our individuals, our teams and community, again, I think may be fitting in the sort of HR side. The measurement of behaviors is certainly, I think, fitting in the people side. The behavioral norms that we want in our business is the behaviors and how this works in our team, as individuals and as a team. Our skills, but not just our technical skills, but our culture change and our improvement skills, again, perhaps fits in the people side. And our levels of engagement and the achievements, again, fit on our people side. So the thinking of this is the sort of stuff that should be on our visual management boards, not just in the HR department, but across the whole business. And it's often the sort of stuff that's lacking. And the better the organization is, the more of this that I'm actually seeing. I've probably seen no one with all of that in there. So I'm sort of suggesting that if we were trying to get a more coherent framework, the visual management board, and this is just a template, this is not meant to go and copy this board, But these are the things, if we want to have a we need to have all this, not just in HR, but for every department, including manufacturing across the organization. So that's a sort of template for thinking about applying that. So again, if we go back to this quote from this this person here, the board, to have the technical and the human, and we were working on the behaviors, we'd probably be getting a lot better on our journey to getting 80% of lean right. Okay, there are other things as well, but it would be a good start. So just something from Cheryl again here, a couple of quotes from her. This is actually from an article in the Target magazine. So what she's talking about lean and HR here is through attracting and retaining qualified employees has for many years, though attracting and retaining qualified employees for many years has been a perennial challenge for manufacturers, few of them, even those that have adopted lean principles in other areas of the business, have leveraged lean to improve HR outcomes. Worse, the HR department too often is not involved or is only tangentially involved in the company's initiatives. And to a degree, I found that even in many of the organizations I was talking to with the good examples of lean in HR. And I said, well, how does HR contribute to the lean effort outside of the HR department? And quite often I was getting a few blank stares. Well, what do you mean? You know, the lean people do that who are in the operations department, etc. So really, if we think about this, you know, a lot of lean is about the 7 traditional waste, but what about the wasted human potential? And in discussions with Cheryl, we've come to the conclusion that the wasted human potential waste is actually probably the biggest waste of all, because that's actually meaning that we're getting far less out of the people than we might do. So again, dropping back into some of the literature on this, the Leica and Hasea's book, they're sort of hinting at this. They talk a lot in this book about the Kentucky site in Toyota, and I want to particularly pick out this middle line here. We build people and cars simultaneously using the Toyota way, which is almost saying to me, going back to, you know, we need to look at the product value stream, but the people value stream, and these are the 2 value streams we should be managing. And if we think about some of the sort of science behind this, in lean, when we talk about the science behind it, we tend to be thinking about Deming and PDCA and, you know, some of the engineering and you know, physics and all that sort of stuff. But actually, we need to be thinking about some of the behavioral science that's sitting behind making lean work in the organization. So things like, you know, psychology and sociology and so forth. And so in the summer, I gave a talk at a Shingo virtual conference that was talking about some of this behavioral science. I won't go into huge depth, but if we think about some of these things here, like the neuroscience helping us to understand how we can hardwire habits, or ABC or Hawthorne, I'll explain a couple of these. They have a major influence in how we actually apply this good thinking to make lean or enterprise excellence, how we make leader standard work, how we make Gemba work, for example. So just to show you this example on neuroscience, I don't know if this is an area you're familiar with, but neuroscience is basically how the thought works in the brain. And it's a bit like, one of my colleagues once described this as trying to get through the jungle. And the first time you go through the jungle, you're going through with a machete. And it's really, really tough. You can go about 1 mile a day or something going through the jungle. But then if you go back and the next day you go through that same path in the jungle, you can do that 1 mile in, I don't know, 25 minutes, 30 minutes or something like that. It's not as fast as walking, but it's very quick. But the more you let that jungle come up, the more it becomes slower and slower. So if you let it grow for a year, you're almost back to, it'll take a day to get that first mile. And hence, if you take that thinking into applying lean, it's actually in the leader standard work. If you can hardwire brain to do repetitive basis. So hence, again, walk is every morning at 7 o'clock. A team board meeting is at 8 o'clock every morning. And actually, it becomes almost painful if you don't do that, because it becomes hardwired into how you actually think. So in this book, 4+1, they talk quite a lot about that. My colleague Chris Butterworth and a couple of other guys out in Australia talk about the neuroscience behind this. And another one I was going to pick out, I won't pick all of these out because trying to understand behavioural science in about 5 minutes is not possible, but this one links quite nicely into some of the stuff we were talking about, the visual management board and the Huddles. Is if you look at some of the cognitive behavioural theories, which a lot of it is done around children and children's learning and so forth. But if we're trying to change the behaviour in individuals, etc., we often look at the behaviour and then we have consequences. So you had good behaviour, well done, or you had bad behaviour. You know, we shout at people or whatever it is, we tell them off, etc. But what this science tells us is that there's probably two things that we should be doing. If we want to change behaviour, we need to work on the antecedents of creating the behaviour. So things like on the visual management board, actually looking at the behaviours, having those regular conversations like we saw in ST in India, we're making it visible. We're having another little bit of behavioural science is something called nudge, which is we nudge people to think about it, which would be these signals on the board. And then the consequences, again, behavioural science would suggest that we often, when we're managing or leading, and you think of your leaders in the organisation, we often manage by telling people what to do, or by telling them off, or correcting their behaviour. You shouldn't do it that way, you should do it this way. And the behavioural science, particularly led by this guy, Ogden Lindsay, who looks, I don't know, it looks like a bag caricature from the 1970s or something. But what he found in his research, and this was actually on learning. So if we think about what lean is about, it's a lot of it is about increasing the rate of learning for people in the organization, so they get better, so we all improve. Is he found the optimum ratio between praise, or what we could call recognition, perhaps in lean or HR circles, and correction, in other words, don't do it like that, do it like this, was 3.57 to 1. And actually, let's call it 4 to 1 for the sake of argument. Organizations talking to team members and so forth, they actually are often doing 4 times as much correction as recognition, whereas actually they should do it the other way around. So these are a few things, the behavioural science and the people side and the HR, which should be much more influencing how are we actually managing, how are we applying lean in the organisation. So those are just 2 examples. We could go through a lot more than that. And well, if you take recognition, for example, reward and recognition, some of the research I did, I was using some McKinsey data and added some of my own thinking to this as well, is if we think about how much effort does it take to reward and recognise people, or cost, if it costs money, and how effective, the things that tend to be the highest level of effectiveness with those effort or costs, green area, these are actually all the things that we should be getting our leaders and managers in the organization to do. But actually they don't know this stuff because it's not in the lean textbooks. So actually we should be thinking about praise, opportunities to lead projects, leadership attention, training programs, recognition events, public acknowledgement. So in other words, much more this people softer focus to make a lot of the other stuff a lot more effective. The thing is, those of you probably from HR will know this. The trouble is most of the other people in the organization don't know this. So hence we don't create the environment for this to work as well as it might. Which takes me forward to this sort of idea of the value stream, which is sort of almost where I think Toyota have got to. So again, this is actually from another of Jeff's book with this guy, David Meyer, who's also ex-Kentucky Toyota. Toyota's company's only source of competitive differentiation is the exceptional people they develop. That has been their priority. So again, this learning and development. And at Toyota, the teaching, the role of the manager, the leader, the team leader, the group leader, whatever, is very much about teaching and development of that. And in this book, they look at, the book is written around this picture, which is, if you like, this is very much the sort of life cycle of people in the organization. So we attract them, we develop them, we engage them, inspire them, etc. So sort of flow through, and you can sort of map onto that the traditional sort of HR sub-functions. And what they're suggesting is then you do all these other things that sort of align to it. So rather than we do lean, and part of lean is strategy deployment and servant leadership and what we're all suggesting here is that this is the flow we should actually be managing, and some of these other areas should be, the main flow should actually be the people, like the main flow should be the product in the organization. So if you look at how they've applied this sort of similar thinking, this is the I don't know if any of the, particularly over in Ireland, a lot of people from Ireland went over to the Toyota engine factory in Wales. We clearly can't look at the detail on this, but this is actually around this whole people development cycle for office workers, or non-manufacturing people. So this is the steps of the development. So this is the phases of the jobs as we go from junior to senior. This is the off the job, on the job coaching. And as you can see, the majority of, particularly the middle onwards, is on the job learning rather than off the job. So it's not classroom development, it's the on the job and coaching, etc. And this is around the KPIs and the behaviors that they expect. So this is this little picture in the middle, is what they're saying is that it's not the role of the leaders, the senior managers, etc., from all functions, is very much about supporting their people in their development and their learning and their improvement. So it's not just we train them, because if you train them, they get the knowledge, they understand it, and they lose it. It's the ability to support their ongoing development. And the unfortunate thing is that to some degree, we lost a bit of this on the HR journey in the last 20 years, and the line managers haven't sufficiently picked it up. And probably we need to get the line manager, he needs to be the catalyst to make this happen. So again, this one is in infinite detail, but the site that's got closest to this thinking is actually the Toyota Burniston site, which is the car factory in near Derby in England. And at that site, they've developed an Obeya room. So I've used the word Obeya, so this just means big room. So in other words, it's a sort of room to think about, or war room to think about improvement, when you can't go to the Gemba, the workplace, because it might be the whole site that's relevant. So in Burniston, they have this Obeya room, which it's like a three-sided room with one corridor along the side. So it's an open room. And really, what they have around this wall is a huge amount of depth, which is basically this life cycle of people in the organization. So it's this sort of people value stream. So what they're talking about is the overview of how this works. So for instance, this picture is lower levels, we should be mostly task orientated, whereas higher levels, we should be mostly coaching orientated. So this is sort of the overview of how we manage this people flow. This is how we recruit, often more in a behavioral way than a skills way. This is what we expect of a team member, how we measure them, what behaviors that would be expected of them, what their role is, what we'd expect them to do, for example. So that's one wall. And then the two back walls are looking at how we manage a team leader. So what is the role of a team leader? So this is all the things that they do? How would we measure them? How would we improve them? How would they run meetings? So they think of the role of the team leader, the visual management meetings at that level. They think of that all in terms of that person and the flow of their knowledge and their skills, rather than these other things being separate. And again, as we go to a senior team leader, as we go along the back wall here, the group leader, which is like the first level of management, senior group leader, and then looking at how the measures they would apply and the role, etc. And then going around to the final wall is actually looking at the senior managers. So this would be like the senior office managers and so forth, and what is then the core standards for applying these different roles. So these boards, they combine a lot of what's my job, how am I going to be measured, what's the right behavior, what's expected of me, and also makes it very visual of what's the next step in my career, what would I expect it to do, how does my role work, what examples of it. So this is very much a learning and development. They haven't quite used the word people value stream, so I'm using that term here. But I'm translating it into sort of the cartoon of this is this. This picture I actually drew on the back of an envelope, I think literally about 17 years ago, with one of my colleagues who's coming from an HR background, and we agreed this is what we should do, but we never really got doing it. If a lean thinker was the people life cycle, this is what we might see. So we might see the customer. So this is like, if you're familiar with a value map, this is a sort of cartoon of a value stream map, looking at the people bit rather than the product. So the line manager is the customer. So they want the number of people with these skills and this engagement and so forth. And then certainly in larger organizations, we tend to organize ourselves according to these sub-functions or processes. Now, obviously they might be slightly different name, but these sort of types come to mind. And then our supplier, if we're thinking about hiring people or improving their skills, this is a make or buy, or we hire someone to help us. And our individual comes in, and then we're looking at their physical flow through the organization. And what we sometimes see is these different sub-functions in HR not necessarily lined up particularly well. That the people that recruit might recruit according to skills, but we induct according to behaviors. Our employee relations don't line up. So sometimes we sort of see, it's a bit like if we're managing the different parts of production, we're managing the different bits, it doesn't flow particularly well. And the result of that is sometimes people are leaving earlier than they might be. We're not perhaps providing what the customer wants, and people perhaps don't stay as long as they might, maybe 4 years, but actually this ratio is based on some earlier research I did with some accounting colleagues of mine in North Italy. And we found that the average value ratio for people in organization was about 45%. So in other words, most than half of our time doing things the customer wouldn't like to pay for. So if we think of the wasted potential, we have a huge amount of wasted potential in terms of here, huge wasted potential in terms of over recruiting people. And obviously inside that, getting them up to speed takes a long time as well. So lots and lots of waste here. And add that to this concept here that comes from, I don't know if any of you have come across this book, The Flow Psychology of Happiness. It's a psychology book by, I'm going to call this gentleman Michael. He's Hungarian origin American. But this is very much what Christian was, the happiness of the people are. And this book is not about work. This is about home environment. And what Mihaly is talking about is that for many people, they're taking on So how ready and able am I to take on responsibility? And to what degree am I given responsibility? So people here are in the zone of frustration. So I'm ready to take on more responsibility, but I'm not allowed to do that, which means that we're frustrated and not happy. Equally well, given too much responsibility and I'm not ready for it, I get very anxious. But actually, you can apply this exact thinking to the organization. And when I showed this to one of my friends in Toyota a little while back, he said this absolutely applies to what we do at Toyota. We flow people during their career in the organization. This is the personal flow Mihaly talks about in this stretch zone. So they're working just outside what they're capable of, but they're giving this coaching and development to actually excel at that. So if we apply that to this lean flow, we could say line manager is a customer. We might need to think of different things that we actually do in HR. We might maybe even need to challenge some of the sub-functional things that we do. So maybe we should be thinking about what are the behaviors we need in the organization? What are the competencies, not just for job, but improvement job and culture change job, which obviously meets with some of the traditional lean colleagues. Performance guidelines, you know, is the traditional yearly annual review the right way to do this? Think of our standard work set for HRD. Think of how we're coaching the line managers to get better at delivering some of this frontline coaching and development of people. And then we could think about, instead of starting with managing people by these sort of subs, a bit like we do in manufacturing in a classic unlean, we start with the needs of the line manager as the customer. We identify the supermarket of skills and behavior and engagement, people numbers, wellness of employees that we're actually looking for. And then we think of the individual, and then we manage, instead of we managing horizontally, classic sort of non-lead organization, we think about optimized flows, which links to the sort of psychology thing I was talking about, the ongoing training and development, the personal behavioral deployment, the listening, accountability and recognition, coaching and social support, emotional and physical well-being. So if we do something more like this, people might stay much longer. They might have a much higher value adding. They might feel a lot happier in the organization. They might stay longer. And this is the sort of thing that some of those organizations, that sort of new age tech company, this is much more the sort of feel that they're doing without sort of necessarily this model. And hence we get a happier individual and a happier customer. Now, I'm a bit conscious I've sort of rambled on forever, and I don't know if, hopefully you're not losing the will to live here, but I think for now I'm going to stop and not go through any more slides. But you've probably got the idea of what this sort of people value stream sort of idea might look like, and how we might try and sort of use that as a frame rather than some of the additional lean areas. So what I'm going to suggest now is, if we're okay to stay on for a little bit, is maybe we could move off into some workshop activity and have a conversation about a few of these things. Would that be some learnings from this?
We've had quite a few people who've had to leave because of other calls. So I think we probably are down to our last three. So we have Emmett, Renee and Sean still going strong. So
no problem.
I have to go.
Well, maybe we can do it.
Yeah, sorry.
Everyone's going.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Emmett.
Bye, Emmett. Thank you.
Well, I don't think there's any point going into groups because there's now. I don't know. Maybe it's worth, you know, what are your thoughts or learnings or reflections on some of the things, you know, in this second part?
If I can start, Peter, for me, it's
it's great
to sort of hear this thought pattern, if you like. It's something that when I completed my my master's at Cranfield a couple of years back, it's something that was sort of brought home to me a little bit, not just from a lean perspective, from an operational perspective, and across all the other functions that, the people side of the business, which is something I think has been personally left behind, if you like. As you've said, it's kind of, as HR organizations have reorganized, if you like, the people side of, or people in their functions has just become, I hate to use the term robots, but it seems a little bit like that. And people seem to not have that engagement. I use all the sort of terminology that's out there at the minute, but it's those things that I see, and one of my big sort of legacies that I'd like to change as I continue in my work, but wherever I'm working, is to promote that people side of the business, and we need to be more humane in that aspect. I came from a company, GKN, you might know, across in Bristol. I used to work for them, and one of the things that they didn't have a very, if I speak openly, they didn't have a very good lean organization. They had a very big lean organization. I don't think it was deployed as well as they probably could have.
Was this aerospace or?
This was GKN as a whole, actually. I did work in aerospace and film, but I did work at the
Philip Holt
in Redditch.
Did you?
Yeah, so Philip started after me, so I know of Philip, but I've never worked with him. But this was before Philip joined, really, before GKN was split up by Melrose when they were bought out. But they had a lean organization, which, as I said, they had a lot of the tools and the processes and everything in the background. The way that they managed it is that if the businesses wanted to have some advice and some training, then they would pull on that. Well, a lot of the businesses didn't pull, so it didn't move. But what they did have on the flip side was a very, very strong people development process. And probably my career exploded. So when I went to GKN, I worked with them for 7 years. And when I left Crane initially, I was a value stream manager, and when I came back, I'm the director of the CBS across the whole of Crane. So, my career took off, and that's thanks from a people side. It's thanks to GKN and the development that they put me through. So I've firsthand I've seen the benefits, really, of having a very strong people-focused organization.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts, René?
Yeah, I'm happy to hear the thoughts, because they have been in here for a long time. So so it's but it's really the trick here is how to bring us together, right? How to make sure that this happens. So it's really that's the trick here. So it's very good to have it shown as you did now. That was very nice. I really like that. So it will be, I can use it like just a card I can throw in and take the discussions where I go, right?
I mean, I'm sure this is exactly down Christian's road as well.
Yes,
in
exactly.
terms of his, having known him for some years, he thinks very much along these sort of people lines. So that would be.
So it's it's been good.
Good. So I mean, what we're proposing to do is we've been in conversation with Toyota in Burnaston, and it looks like we should be able to do one of our future sessions with them, where they could actually take us through that wall, because clearly the wall, I can't really do justice to it. I think it has to be the people that develop it really talk about it rather than someone from outside. So what we're trying to line up, we've got another call with them, I think next week, is it? Yes, Monday, we're talking with them, is that we would run a session, we'd hear about how they think of HR in Toyota, and then we'd actually spend a time on the Gemba. We'd have to do it with filming, etc. And then they would explain, they go through that wall and actually explain that approach. So you could actually get a a much more detailed, practical approach than the theory I've sort of more covered here. So hopefully that will be useful, interesting for you.
Good. Let's try that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Anything else? Or I mean, I think this is whole exciting area that there's a lot of potential that we're scratching the surface of at the moment, and
it is.
Hopefully we can do it. Good. So should we show those last couple of slides anyway? There's only 2 of us. Hey, we might as well. I've sort of rambled on a little too far, but anyway, just show these last couple of slides.
Do that.
This was yeah. So kilo. Okay, so we got there. So I think Emma, you were gonna maybe.
Yes, so these are just, this is, as Peter mentioned previously, the People Value Stream Virtual Network, which Peter and Cheryl Jekyll have recently put together. And the launch event is on Thursday. So Renee and Sean, you may have seen an email from me with the flyer and details on how to join. So if that is of interest, we do still have spaces on the virtual launch event happening this Thursday. I'll send it again as an invite, as a follow-up email, sorry, with the material for this webinar, this workshop as well. But really what the network is we're planning on meeting with like-minded individuals once a month for 90 minutes as really a platform to share sort of different elements of the people value stream, and having kind of drawing from the members during those 90 minutes with input from guest speakers, sort of benchmarking again, and obviously Peter Hines and Cheryl Jekyll there as well. So we're offering one free place to our members, the Enterprise Excellence Network members. And obviously, if there's more from your organisation that do want to join, then there's an annual fee of £1,200. So that's sort of just a bit of background into the new network which Peter and Cheryl are running.
So it's the idea of that is probably it's a much more audience like we've had today, that might be half might be lean people and half might be HR people, and seeing how we can bring it together. So that's the idea of that. And the idea of this is less, you know, we're not going to go and do visits, because in HR it's less about visits, it's more about conversations and so forth. And we want this more to be conversations in the group than us making presentations. So we might put a bit of input, but we'll take a topic and say, well, how should we manage that? So the first one we're going to take is this performance management. You know, should it be the traditional, as we were saying earlier, you know, we'll score you up and you'll get your bonus according to that, or should it be really be an informal coaching, daily mentoring type approach where you don't have this sort of formal approach that we're traditionally doing? Because, you know, the argument is that might be doing more harm good and so forth. So the idea of the network is very much discussion based, and because Cheryl's based over in the States, we see probably be half European and half North American. So we're going to do it sort of at a time, this sort of time of day, so we can do that. So as Emma said, we're making one place available each of the members in the group, if you want to take part. But you'll have to fight it out with Dave, Sean.
Yes, it'll be Dave's call, that's for sure.
Okay, and then this 3 more slides. Yeah. Oh well, this slide was this. So this is V-Day. So this was the first person in the world given a non-trial COVID injection at 6:30 this morning. This lady in Coventry, she got the Pfizer jab. Sorry, it's not the Eli Lilly. But I think this gives us some hope that maybe we could actually get back to some physical meetings. It's probably not going to be the first half of the year, but maybe, who knows, by the second half of the year.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, we need to plan virtually. So should I leave this with you, Emma?
Yeah. So these are the virtual events that we have planned. We don't have the dates as of yet, but these are sort of on our radar. So working with Kostas from the members, and having an event based around coping with COVID and how Hilti have survived in running activities during the crisis. And the other one, as Peter mentioned, is with Toyota Burnaston. So I won't go into too much detail about that, but focusing on people value stream and really looking at the Obeya room in more detail. And then Lean and Industry 4.0, which is something that we haven't really touched on. So I suppose, Peter, moving more away from the people side of Lean and going slightly more technical. And that's
this is almost saying, we spent quite a bit of time on the people side. Let's go the other side of Lean. Let's have a look at the technology, particularly the digital technology. And Schneider Electric are one of the leaders in this. They got a program called Phoenix 4.0, which is sort of a combination of Lean and Industry 4.0. So they're willing to share some of that with us, which I think will be quite interesting to look at some of the technology side as well.
Yeah, and then the last thing is a new thing that Peter and I were discussing for really collaborating with our members and having a kind of global Lean program. So where we would suggest almost 3 of our members as almost the sort of hosts and really talking about different aspects of their Lean journey and their different sort of programs that they're running. So that's something which we will begin to sort of look into and develop through conversations with our members in the coming weeks. So that's a new kind of almost like a learning kind of workshop between the members, and also a good opportunity for our members to actually speak more together as opposed to kind of having a workshop and being presented to. So yeah.
I mean, our thought process on this is between this group, we've got some really excellent companies doing a lot of programs that might be multi-site and so forth, and there must be a lot of expertise that we could benefit from sharing with each other. So if we took 3 of you, maybe could take a different aspect each, share that knowledge, and then we could have some workshop and so forth around that. Does that sound interesting, useful?
Yes,
it does from my side.
Okay, good. So that's what we're planning. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
So yeah. I'll send across the follow-up email with all of the material, webinar, and the flyer for the People Value Stream network launch event as well, which is this Thursday at 3 p.m. UK time, which is happening. So I'll send that all across. But thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Same to you.
Okay, thanks guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks,
Bye.
Peter.
See you again. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.